I stared at my reflection in the mirror, running my fingers over the fine lines that had formed around my eyes. 45 years. That's how long I'd been on this earth. And for 20 of those years, I'd been married to Richard. The same Richard who barely looked at me anymore. Tonight was our 20th anniversary party, a celebration that felt more like a formality than anything else. I smoothed down my burgundy dress, a splurge I'd justified as a gift to myself, and applied a final coat of lipstick. "Are you almost ready?" Richard's voice called from downstairs, impatience evident in his tone. "Everyone's arriving in 15 minutes. "Just finishing up," I replied, taking one last look at myself. The woman in the mirror looked elegant, if a little tired around the eyes. But I was proud of her. She'd raised 2 wonderful children, maintained a successful career as an interior designer, and kept a marriage together through good times and bad. The doorbell rang, and I heard Richard greeting our first guests. Taking a deep breath, I descended the stairs to the living room of our suburban Boston home. "There she is!" my sister-in-law Diane exclaimed, rushing over to embrace me. "Happy anniversary, Claire!" Over the next hour, our house filled with family and friends. My parents, looking frailer than I remembered, sat in the corner, chatting with Richard's college buddies. Our children, Emma and Jason, now in their late teens, mingled with cousins. The caterers moved efficiently through the crowd with trays of appetizers and champagne. Richard stood with his brother and some colleagues from his law firm, laughing loudly at someone's joke. I watched him from across the room, his salt and pepper hair still thick, his body still fit from regular tennis matches. The years had been kind to him. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out, and Richard raised his glass, commanding the room's attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice confident and clear. 20 years ago, I married Claire, and what a journey it's been." I smiled, moving to stand beside him as everyone's eyes turned to us. "Claire was quite the catch back then," Richard continued, and a few people chuckled. "Captain of the debate team, already planning her design business." He paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Of course, time changes us all." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "You've aged badly," he said suddenly, looking me up and down. His words were loud enough for everyone to hear, and they landed like a physical blow. Not like the woman I married. I felt the color drain from my face as a few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Emma's mouth fell open in shock, and my mother half rose from her seat. "Richard!" Diane hissed, but he ignored her. "What?" Richard shrugged, sipping his scotch. "Just stating facts. 20 years does a number on some people." The room was so quiet, I could hear the ice clinking in glasses. I stood frozen, humiliation burning through me. 20 years of marriage reduced to a cruel comment about my appearance. Just as I was about to flee the room, movement from the back caught my attention. A man I didn't recognize, tall, with kind eyes and silver temples, stood up from his seat near the window. He was holding a champagne flute. "If I may," he said, his voice gentle but firm. He raised his glass toward me. "She only looks old to those who never really saw her." The room went completely silent. "I don't believe we've met," Richard said stiffly, "and this is a private party." The stranger smiled. "James Harrington. I'm your new client's architectural consultant. Your assistant said to drop off the blueprints tonight since you'd be home." He gestured to a leather portfolio by the door. "I was leaving when I heard your speech." James turned to me, his eyes warm. "I've seen your design work, Mrs. Bennett. Your restoration of the Williams property was inspired. Anyone who can create such beauty clearly possesses it within themselves." I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Thank you," I managed. Richard's face had turned an angry red. "Well, thanks for dropping off the plans. Now if you'll excuse us—" "Actually," I interrupted, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, "I think I could use some fresh air. Would anyone like to join me on the patio?" Several people immediately moved toward the French doors, relief evident on their faces. As I turned to lead them outside, I caught James's eye again. He gave me a small nod of respect before setting down his glass and heading for the front door. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped onto the patio, and I drew in a deep breath. 20 years. 2 decades of my life invested in a man who could humiliate me in front of everyone we knew. "Mom?" Emma appeared at my side, her young face tight with concern. "Are you okay?" I placed my arm around my daughter's shoulders. "I will be," I said, and for the first time that evening, I believed it. The party ended early. No one seemed to have the stomach for celebration after Richard's comment. As the last guests departed, murmuring awkward goodbyes, I busied myself with cleaning up, though the caterers had left little for me to do. "You're overreacting," Richard said, loosening his tie as he entered the kitchen. "It was just a joke." I placed a stack of dessert plates in the dishwasher before responding. "A joke is supposed to be funny, Richard." No one was laughing. "Some people were," he countered defensively. "Yes, you and your brother. Everyone else was mortified." I closed the dishwasher with more force than necessary. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" Richard rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. Since when did you become so sensitive? And who was that guy anyway? Quite the white knight routine. He told you who he was, and he was just being decent, something you might want to try sometime." I walked past him toward the stairs. "I'm going to bed." "Claire," Richard called after me, his tone softening slightly. "It's our anniversary." I paused, one hand on the banister. "Yes, it is." That night, I slept in the guest room, staring at the ceiling until dawn crept through the curtains. By morning, I had made a decision. Richard was already at the kitchen table with his coffee and newspaper when I came downstairs. "Look," he began without looking up, "about last night." "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while," I interrupted, pouring myself a cup of coffee. My hands were steady even as my heart raced. "I need some time to think." Now he looked up, surprise evident on his face. "You're leaving?" Over one comment. It wasn't just one comment, Richard. It was 20 years of comments, 20 years of little digs and criticisms, 20 years of me shrinking to make room for your ego. I sat down across from him. "When was the last time you asked about my work, or complimented me, or even really saw me?" Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. "You're being dramatic. Every marriage has rough patches. This isn't a rough patch. This is a pattern." I took a sip of my coffee. "I've already called Melissa. She's expecting me this afternoon." "And the kids?" "Emma and Jason are old enough to understand that their parents need some space. Besides, Emma already texted me this morning. She's pretty upset with you." Richard's face darkened. "So now you're turning our children against me?" "I didn't have to," I replied quietly. "You did that all on your own last night." I spent the morning packing a suitcase, while Richard stomped around the house, alternating between angry muttering and stony silence. As I was loading my car, my phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Bennett, this is James Harrington. I got your number from your website. I wanted to apologize for any additional awkwardness I may have caused last night. That wasn't my intention." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing a reply. "No apology necessary. Thank you for your kindness." 3 dots appeared then. "Your work really is exceptional. If you're ever interested in collaborating on the Robertson project, I'd be honored. No pressure, of course." Something warm unfurled in my chest. Not romance, but something equally powerful. Professional recognition. Respect. "I'll think about it," I wrote back. The drive to Melissa's took 40 minutes, through neighborhoods increasingly unfamiliar. My sister lived in a small townhouse in Cambridge, having downsized after her divorce 3 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Oh, honey," she said when she opened the door to find me on her doorstep, suitcase in hand. Without another word, she pulled me into a hug. Over a glass of wine that evening, I told her everything. Not just about the party, but about the years of subtle erosion that had worn away at my self-worth. "I should have said something sooner," Melissa said, refilling our glasses. "The way he talks to you, it's not right, Claire. It never was." I kept thinking it would get better, I admitted. That once the kids were older, once his practice was established, once he felt more secure, but it never changed. "So what now?" she asked. I looked out her kitchen window at the unfamiliar street below. "I don't know, but for the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe." My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad's ordering takeout and acting like nothing happened. Can I come stay with you tonight?" "Of course," I replied. "So that's the first step," I told Melissa, showing her the message. "Being there for my kids. The rest, I'll figure out as I go." Later, as I made up the sofa bed in Melissa's home office, my phone pinged again. Another message from James Harrington. "I hope you're doing all right. Regardless of your decision about the project, I meant what I said. True beauty doesn't fade. It evolves." I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the phone and feeling something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. The quiet certainty that I was worth more than I'd been settling for. Emma arrived at Melissa's townhouse around 8, her backpack slung over one shoulder and a determined expression on her face. "He's acting like nothing happened," she fumed as she stepped inside. "Like he didn't completely humiliate you in front of everyone." I hugged my daughter, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "How's Jason handling it?" "He's upset too, but you know Jason, he's not great at confrontation. He's staying at Dad's tonight, but he texted that he'll come see you tomorrow." Emma dropped her backpack on a chair. "So, is this it? Are you guys getting divorced?" The directness of her question caught me off guard. "I don't know, honey. Right now I just needed some space to think." Melissa appeared from the kitchen with a mug of hot chocolate for Emma. "Your mum's doing what she needs to do. That's what matters right now." Later, after Emma had settled into Melissa's guest room, I sat cross-legged on the sofa bed, scrolling through my phone. 3 missed calls from Richard, which I wasn't ready to return. Several supportive texts from friends who'd been at the party, and an email notification from my design firm. A new client inquiry for a major project. I opened it, expecting one of our regular commercial clients. Instead, I found myself looking at a proposal from Robertson Luxury Developments, the very client James Harrington worked with. "We were impressed by your portfolio," the email read, "and would like to discuss engaging your services for our new riverfront development. James Harrington specifically recommended you for your innovative approach to blending traditional elements with modern functionality." My heart raced as I read the details. This was no small project. This was the kind of contract that could take my small design firm to an entirely new level, the kind of opportunity I'd been working toward for years. Without overthinking it, I composed a professional response, suggesting a meeting later that week. Then I texted James. "Just received the Robertson inquiry. Thank you for the recommendation." His reply came quickly. "They were already interested. I just made sure your portfolio made it to the top of the pile. You deserve this opportunity." I fell asleep that night with my mind racing between thoughts of my marriage, my children, and this unexpected professional doorway that had suddenly opened. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Melissa making coffee and Emma's music drifting from the guest room. For a moment, I lay still, absorbing the unfamiliar ceiling and the weight of decisions yet to be made. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "This has gone on long enough. When are you coming home?" Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I miss you." Just an expectation that I would return, as if my departure were merely an inconvenience to be overcome. Before I could respond, the phone rang, Jason calling. "Mom?" My son's voice sounded younger somehow, uncertain. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just taking some time to sort things out. Dad's been pacing around all morning." "He says you're overreacting." I sighed. "What do you think, Jason?" A pause. "I think what he said was really messed up. And not just at the party. He does it all the time, doesn't he?" The perceptiveness of my children sometimes took my breath away. "Yes," I admitted. "He does. I'll come by after school, okay? I love you, Mum." "I love you too, honey." After breakfast, I set up my laptop at Melissa's kitchen table to work remotely. I had client meetings to reschedule and designs to finalize. Focusing on work felt good, normal and productive in the midst of emotional chaos. At noon, Melissa left for her job at the university library, and I found myself alone in her quiet home. I made a cup of tea and stepped out onto her small balcony, watching the Cambridge streets below. My phone rang, displaying Richard's number again. This time, I answered. "Claire." His voice was tight with controlled frustration. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk out on 20 years of marriage because of one comment." It wasn't one comment, Richard. It was the last comment in a very long line of them. "So what? You're punishing me now? Teaching me a lesson?" I leaned against the balcony railing. "No, I'm respecting myself enough to say that I won't be spoken to that way anymore. People are going to talk, you know, about us, about you walking out. Let them talk. I'm more concerned about how our children feel, hearing their father speak to their mother that way." A beat of silence. "The kids are fine. They understand it was just a joke." "That's not what they've told me," I replied quietly. "You've always been too sensitive," he said, his voice hardening. "Ever since we met, always reading too much into everything." I closed my eyes, suddenly weary. "This conversation isn't productive, Richard. I need to go." "Claire?" I ended the call and stood for a long moment, letting the spring breeze wash over my face. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of work emails and project planning. At 3 o'clock, I had a video call with my business partner, Denise. "I heard about what happened," she said after we'd discussed client matters. "Are you all right?" "Getting there," I replied. "Actually, we received an inquiry from Robertson Luxury Developments this morning." Denise's eyes widened. "Seriously? Claire, that's huge. How did they find us?" "An architectural consultant they work with recommended us. He was, coincidentally, at the anniversary party." "The universe works in mysterious ways," Denise said with a smile. "This could be exactly what you need right now, professionally and personally." By the time Jason arrived after school, I had confirmed a meeting with Robertson Developments for Friday morning. Seeing my son's lanky frame in Melissa's doorway brought a rush of emotions. "Hey, Mom," he said, awkwardly shifting his weight. At 17, he was caught in that space between boy and man, still finding his footing. I hugged him tight. "Thank you for coming." We sat in Melissa's small living room, and Jason told me about the tense atmosphere at home, about Richard's alternating anger and dismissiveness. "He doesn't get it," Jason said, frustration evident in his voice. "He doesn't see how he talks to you, or maybe he does and just doesn't care. Your father loves us in his own way," I said carefully. "But sometimes love isn't enough if there isn't also respect." Jason looked at me directly, his eyes so like mine. "Are you coming back?" "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But whatever happens between your father and me doesn't change how much we both love you and Emma." He nodded, accepting this with the quiet maturity that always surprised me. That evening, with both my children at Melissa's, we ordered pizza and watched an old movie, creating a small island of normalcy in a sea of uncertainty. As I looked at their faces in the blue light of the television, I realized that whatever path I chose, I needed to model for them what self-respect looked like, what boundaries looked like, what valuing oneself looked like. Later, after they had gone to bed, I received another text from James. "Hope your day went well. Robertson team is looking forward to meeting you Friday." I smiled at the professional tone, grateful for his respect for boundaries. "Thank you. I'm looking forward to it too. If you need any background on the project before then, I'm happy to provide it. No pressure." I hesitated, then replied, "Actually, if you're free for coffee tomorrow, that might be helpful." His response was prompt. 3 p.m. at Voltage Coffee? It's near your sister's place." I paused, wondering how he knew where Melissa lived, then remembered I'd listed her address as my temporary contact on the Robertson email. "See you then," I wrote back, feeling a curious mixture of professional excitement and personal trepidation. This wasn't a date. It was a business meeting, but it was also the first time in 20 years I'd arranged to meet a man who wasn't my husband without Richard's knowledge. As I prepared for bed, my phone lit up with a final message from Richard. "This silent treatment is childish, Claire. Come home and we can discuss this like adults." I didn't respond. Some silences spoke volumes. The next day passed in a blur of remote work and conversations with my children. Emma decided to stay another night at Melissa's, while Jason reluctantly returned to our house, promising to call if things got tense with Richard. At 2:45, I found myself outside Voltage Coffee, a trendy Cambridge cafe with industrial decor and large windows. I'd dressed professionally, a navy blazer over a simple blouse, dark jeans, low heels, reminding myself that this was a business meeting, nothing more. James was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 leather portfolios in front of him. He stood when he saw me, offering a warm but professional smile. "Mrs. Bennet, thank you for coming," he said, extending his hand. "Claire, please," I replied, shaking his hand, "and thank you for arranging this." Once seated with our coffees, James opened one of the portfolios, revealing detailed plans for the Robertson Riverfront development. It's a mixed-use project, luxury condominiums, retail space, and a public waterfront promenade. They're looking for an interior design approach that balances exclusivity with warmth. I studied the plans, making notes and asking questions. James answered each one thoroughly, his respect for my expertise evident in every interaction. For an hour, we discussed sightlines and traffic flow, material selections and lighting concepts. It felt invigorating to be taken so seriously, to have my ideas met with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. "You clearly know your stuff," James said as we wrapped up the professional portion of our meeting. "Robertson would be lucky to have you on this project." "Thank you," I said, closing my notebook, "for the information and for the recommendation." A brief silence fell between us, hovering in that space between professional and personal. "I hope I'm not overstepping," James said finally, "but how are you doing after the other night?" I considered deflecting, keeping things strictly professional, but something in his genuine concern made me answer honestly. "I'm taking it day by day. It's complicated when you've built 20 years of life with someone." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I was married for 16 years. It ended 4 years ago." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "Don't be. It was necessary." He took a sip of his coffee. We had become different people than who we married. Neither of us was wrong, just wrong for each other anymore. The simple truth of his statement resonated with me. "How did you know when it was time to end it?" "When the thought of continuing as we were felt more painful than the thought of starting over." His eyes met mine, clear and direct. "When I realized I was teaching my daughter that it was okay to be unhappy as long as you kept up appearances." We talked for another half hour about his daughter now in college, about my children's reactions, about the strange weightlessness of redefining oneself midlife. Throughout, he maintained a respectful distance, never once implying anything beyond friendly support and professional respect. As we prepared to leave, he handed me the second portfolio, some additional materials about Robertson's design philosophy. It might help for Friday's meeting. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "Good luck with everything, Claire," he said as we parted outside the cafe. "Whatever you decide." I walked back to Melissa's feeling lighter somehow, more certain of my path forward. Not because of James specifically, but because our conversation had reminded me that there was a whole world of possibilities beyond the narrow confines of my marriage, professionally and perhaps someday, personally as well. When I arrived at Melissa's, I found Richard waiting in his car outside. "We need to talk," he said as I approached, rolling down his window. "Not here on the street." "Can we go somewhere?" I hesitated, then nodded. "There's a park around the corner." We walked in silence to the small neighborhood green space, taking seats on a bench beneath a budding maple tree. Spring was asserting itself, new life emerging from winter's grip. "You've made your point," Richard began. "I shouldn't have said what I said at the party. It was inappropriate. Not cruel, not hurtful, just inappropriate, as if his only error had been a breach of social etiquette. It's not about that one comment, Richard. It's about a pattern, years of subtle put-downs and dismissals." He sighed impatiently. "Everyone says things they regret sometimes, Claire. You're not perfect either. I'm not claiming to be perfect. I'm asking for respect. And moving out without discussion is respectful." His voice took on a familiar edge. "Embarrassing me in front of our friends and family?" I looked at him directly. "When was the last time you complimented me? Not my cooking or my ability to organize the kids' schedules, but me." His silence was answer enough. "I have a major client meeting on Friday," I said, changing direction. "A project that could be transformative for my firm." "That's good," he replied, clearly thrown by the shift in topic. "But what does that have to do with us?" "Everything. I need to know who I am outside of being your wife. I need to remember the woman I was before I started shrinking myself to accommodate your ego." Richard's face hardened. "So this is it? 20 years thrown away?" "I didn't say that. I said I need time. Space to think clearly without your voice in my head telling me I'm overreacting, being too sensitive, misunderstanding your jokes. And what am I supposed to tell people?" I stood, suddenly tired of the conversation. "Tell them the truth. That your wife is taking some time to herself after you publicly humiliated her at your anniversary party." He rose too, anger flashing in his eyes. "You're different ever since that night. That man at the party." "James had nothing to do with this," I interrupted. "This has been building for years. He just happened to be the one person who stood up and said what everyone else was thinking. So now a stranger understands our marriage better than I do. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see what's been in front of us all along." Richard's phone rang, breaking the tension. He checked it and frowned. "I have to take this. It's the office." He looked at me, conflict evident in his expression. "This conversation isn't over, Claire." "No," I agreed. "But it's over for today." I watched him walk away, answering his call, and felt a curious sense of clarity. The Friday meeting with Robertson Developments suddenly seemed like more than just a professional opportunity. It was a doorway to a future I was just beginning to imagine. That evening, as Emma and I prepared dinner in Melissa's kitchen, my daughter asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between us. "Mom, if you and Dad split up, would you ever date anyone else?" I nearly dropped the knife I was using to chop vegetables. "That's not something I'm thinking about right now, honey." Emma continued arranging pasta on plates. "I wouldn't blame you if you did. Dad's been awful to you for as long as I can remember." The matter-of-fact way she said it broke my heart a little. "Your father loves us, Emma. He just doesn't always know how to show it in healthy ways. That doesn't make it okay." My daughter looked at me with eyes far older than her 18 years. "And it doesn't mean you have to keep accepting it." Later that night, I sat on Melissa's balcony wrapped in a blanket against the spring chill, thinking about the path that had led me here and the uncertain road ahead. My phone lit up with a text from James. "Briefed the Robertson team today. They're excited to meet you. You've got this." I smiled at the simple vote of confidence. Whether my marriage could be salvaged or whether 20 years would prove to be enough, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again allow anyone, husband, client, or stranger, to make me feel less than the woman I had become. A woman who, despite Richard's cruel words, had not aged badly at all, but had instead grown into someone stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than the girl he had married 20 years before. And in that knowledge, I found a peace that had eluded me for far too long.